I'm looking forward to talking to you today about ethics in branding.
Definitely. And where do we draw the line? Which I thought was a nice little add-on to the title. So again, you discuss it, Liz, first off, because it's a massive topic that every designer has to go through at every point of their lives. So go for it.
Yes, and I think there are different topics and different themes, and we'll go through a few today and the old school. So basically, ethics in branding, are there things you won't work on, you don't want to work on? Or even as a lot of businesses might refuse to work on certain categories. And traditionally, those kind of categories that might crop up are tobacco, alcohol, gambling. Some of the newer ones are fast fashion, and fossil fuels, AI technology, and monitoring. So we can delve into a few of those. But first off, as an initial question, I would love to know, Mark, have you ever turned anything down that you wouldn't work on? Or is there anything that is a little bit unsure in your mind?
Again, when we proposed this as a subject to talk about, I had to really dig deep into my sort of past and think, what is there? Because I'm quite a moral person. I like to think I'm a moral person. I like to think I have ethics about me. I like to think I'm good and respectful to people and everyone. I try not to be judgmental about anything. So, people who don't exercise as much as me, I don't judge them. People who exercise more than me, I won't judge them. All those sorts of things. So, but I like to think that translates back into my world of design, the way I think. So if I'm honest, there's nothing that I've refused to work on in the past. I have been past work from other people who have said this project isn't something that we're comfortable working on. So it might be, as you said, tobacco. And I have done that in the past. And in fairness, it's quite nice in some respects. It's quite challenging. Tobacco, for example, um, you know what it's like. Certainly in the last sort of 10, maybe 15 years, whenever the pack designs change, when you have this sort of this massive sign that says warning, do not smoke, it will kill you. And you get this tiny, tiny little strip to apply your design. And that's what you got to work with.
Yeah.
So spending, I don't know how that particular project, I'm thinking back, it was on Camel cigarettes. And it was a 4-week project designing this tiny little space. And I found it quite enjoyable, quite challenging. But no, thinking back, there isn't something I've ever turned down, but that's not to say I wouldn't turn anything down. How about you, Liz? Is there anything that you've turned down and refused to work on?
I'm the same view as you a little bit. And years ago, there's always, whenever an agency gets the opportunity to work on something like tobacco, there's normally a little survey going around, if we win this job,
Yeah.
will you work on it? Now, tobacco specifically, I've always thought it's a choice someone makes to smoke. And I honestly never used to think that how pretty a pack design would look. I think it would might dedicate which brand you chose, but I don't think it would be whether you chose to smoke or not. And I think the same with things like drugs. And then now there's a lot more of things like cannabis and stuff like that in our markets. And I don't think someone decides to choose it or not, whether depending on how pretty it is. I think that just depends the brand they pick. I think if someone's gonna drink, they're gonna drink. I
Mm.
don't necessarily think how pretty your bottle design is encourages someone to be an alcoholic. So I've never turned anything down. A bit like you, I'm not saying I never would. I prefer not to work on pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
It's just something that anything that gives people who are going to use it enough information and the truth about it, and then they make an informed choice. That's when I don't have an issue. You make an informed choice, but my head is a bit cloudy with pharmaceuticals because I don't know that being peddled pharmaceuticals necessarily are good for you.
Yeah.
But again, that's just a personal viewpoint. And I have in the past gone into an interview by a recruiter who set me up a big, huge global brand agency, but I didn't know it was to work on a specific account. And they asked me in the interview, they're like, what kind of work that do you thrive on? What do you enjoy doing? And is there any specific area that you would not like to work on? And I was like, I don't really love pharmaceuticals. It's nothing personal to anyone who does. It's not my passion. It's not really something that
Hmm.
I pedal forward. And obviously I didn't get that opportunity when they said, oh, their client's GlaxoSmithKline.
Yeah.
So, there's nothing, a bit like you, like there's nothing really that I would say I will not work on that I've come across so far.
I think the other thing which we need to sort of try and work around is what is unethical? What we term as unethical? Is it how something is sourced? And I think the most important thing is trying to work out how far do you go back in the chain of logistics. So if you've got a product which, again, pertains to be sustainable, ethical, and everything else that ticks all the boxes in terms of how consumers would want to be shopping. But if you start going back in the supply chain and start going into the sort of material suppliers, and I even used the example of inks, for example, ethically sourced inks. I have heard printers talking about this in the past. And whether it's something as you as a consumer, how far do you go back, or a creative, how far do you go back? Do you something that's not I'm not comfortable working on that particular brand because the ink it sources is from an area which it gets produced in a sort of unethical environment using 7-year-old kids, with no mask and no gloves, whatever it might be.
And that's an interesting one that links to our other episode on greenwashing
Yeah,
as well, because there are a lot of brands, and I've got Nestle down here as being continuously told off by the government bodies for misleading people about some of their how recyclable some of their things are, or some of their plastic wrapping not being quite, being more plastic than paper, even though they claim
yeah,
otherwise. And as a designer, sometimes you don't know how right that is. I think to our level now, we're of a leadership level, or we're doing more strategic work. I think there's a real opportunity once you uncover that, because sometimes there are smaller brands. I know your bigger ones, you assume they know. Our job can actually be to educate them. And I definitely know we've worked on smaller brands where they've said, yeah, but we want to clout that we're sustainable. And we'll go, where are your products from? They're like, oh, they're using all natural cottons, but they're not from Australia, they're imported. So, okay, let's talk about the journey of what sustainable means and whether we're actually telling the truth or how we tell the message authentically.
yeah.
And so I think things like, which is what they've done with tobacco, really, if you put it down to it, to go, look, we can design for tobacco, but we're also showing a great big picture of a lung on there so people know the risks.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's almost like transparency.
What do you think about the idea that in today's world, right now, right here, consumers are more cost sensitive and aware that, okay, whilst these products that we're looking at in front of us on shelf might not necessarily be coming from the most ethical environments, I am driven by cost right now, and my £3 coffee jar, whatever it might be, is more appealing to me than the £8
Yep.
coffee jar. And I don't care
Yep.
where it's from right now. At the moment, I want my coffee. I think there's a lot of that going on right now. And so people are starting to almost not look past it, but they'll put it aside for now in the case of they just want to make sure that they're keep within their own budgets. Is that the same in Australia, do you think? Or how are you finding that over there?
Absolutely. And I think globally, people will always be cost conscious. And it's
Yeah,
just balancing. We saw it with sustainability as well. It's, well, will you buy the greener one? Will it cost twice the price? And I think we see it with the fast fashion is an interesting debate in my
yeah,
mind, because I have mixed views on it. Is that, and even the brands that you think are more expensive, so you think they're ethically sourced. There's
yeah.
a really good guy that I follow on Instagram who goes out and uncovers like your designer bags and stuff, and he shows you how they're actually made. Not all of them, but some of the brands, and say actually this costs this much and it's made by a small child in whatever country. And so brands like Shein, Temu, people know their fast fashion, H&M, whatever it is. People know their fast fashion. But what about these? Is there a bigger level of ethics in the brands that are expensive? People assume that they're ethically made that aren't, because they're not telling you they're not. You're just assuming, you're making the assumption. So are we leading people to believe something that's not real by the way that we brand it when it's not real? Whereas, if something is cheap, people questioning, oh, it's probably not right. And then they can make the choice.
As
So I think,
brands, though, I think what they'll tend to do, and as creatives, if it's something they will pick up, there are brands that will focus on the sustainability message, for example, and that becomes their main creative driver, and that's all they'll shout about. But there are other brands which I'm going to use Nike as an example, just because it's the first one that came to mind for no other reason. Nike won't necessarily talk about where their products are made. It's more about maintaining the integrity of the brand, making sure that it's very sporty, athletic, and it fits within that sort of world of sportsmanship. So it's not, I guess we as creative understand that if there's something which they want to try and push forward, and it's, again, markets change, trends change. And so we understand that what was sustainable last year isn't sustainable this year. How much plastic you use in your bottle is the jar that you're producing, or let's say jam jar you're producing, it's got jam in it. Whilst the glass jar is recyclable, the lid might not be. Do you want to only talk about your product is wholly recyclable? No, you don't. So it's just trying to clarify that message. I guess my point is we're trying to make sure that whatever message we are trying to apply is aligned with the brand, and it's up to them how far they want to push it. Would you say the
yeah.
same?
Absolutely. There are some brands, like you said, like Nike, lends itself to its brand values and what it stands for. And it doesn't
Yeah,
say it doesn't claim to be anything in terms of sustainability. I mean, it will talk to it, but it's not pretending to be something it's not. I'm sure there are policies that they've got in place, but they don't go out and shout about them because it's not what they're designed for. It's not what their brand stands for. Like, yes,
Yeah,
everyone is conscious of those things now, but it doesn't need to go out and say we're doing this for sustainability because everyone's like, not no one cares, but it's just not part of their brand ethos. It's not something that you go, well, that's why I buy them. Whereas someone like Patagonia becomes more into question because you would want them to be doing everything ethically and
yeah,
sustainably because they're a brand that stands for that and one was one of the first ones to do so. And that's where morally as designers and as businesses, it's business growth
yeah.
versus moral responsibility and where those lines get a little bit blurry.
I think
Tell me more about
Patagonia is a good one. I was just thinking that Patagonia is a good one because whilst they also, in their own um in their own lane of selling clothing, for example, and fashion produce, they also step alongside that, and I'm sure Patagonia and maybe Finisterre, they do recycled clothes, for example, and so they're very, very much into promoting the idea that you can have your clothes, bring your clothes back, we'll repair them or move them or change the pair of jeans into a pair of shorts, whatever it might be. And so there are certain brands who are quite happy to promote the um that sustainable message
But
beyond selling
even
clothes.
that, do you think even in something like that, because H&M do campaigns often where they're like, bring in an old jacket and we'll give you $10 off a new one. But that's also encouraging consumerism. So it's
Yeah.
also like a sneaky ploy to get people to buy more, which is,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
good point.
it's the question in my head of I love branding. Marketing has to exist with branding, but there are
Yeah.
so many tensions because ultimately they're trying to sell something or a service or a belief or something. You can't avoid that. That's just the industry and the world that we live
You
in.
can't, but that's also a consumer need. Consumers feel they need to have they wanna spend money, they wanna look good, they wanna have new clothes. You give them the choice, they'd rather have new clothes over old clothes. But then it just comes down to people's own, moral compass and that the way they want to think. I mean, I'm not the most fashionable person, as you probably know, Liz, and in fact, you know well. And I certainly don't spend a lot of
Sure.
money on clothes, but I do have friends who are completely opposite, and they spend a fortune on their clothing. And maybe they only wear things once, twice, but I'm very opposite. So maybe I'm fashion conscious in that respect, that I make sure I keep my clothes for as long as possible.
I think that's just like I'm someone who doesn't mind investing in nice clothes, but I'll wear the same clothes to death.
Yeah,
So my minimalist vibe is not to have a lot of them. So I'm not really a fast but I don't buy fast fashion because I don't like buying loads of it and just only wearing it
yeah,
once. It's actually not an ethical thing in my head, which is I know many people go like, "Oh my goodness." You have to be careful now what you say even in the office because if someone says, "Oh, I like your boots," and you're like, "Oh, they're from Shein," they're like, so that you have to watch those kind of moral
yeah,
battles and things that you go into. And
yeah,
that
that's
said, that
true.
if you walk in a pair of Gucci slides, which I have, they'll go, "Are they fake?" So, they're the battles that we go. Let's move a bit away from fashion and talk about you've done a lot of work on alcohol.
Mm,
That's a common one that people work on, and I think a lot of creatives I can speak for love to work on alcohol. It's a
yeah,
great category to work on. I've not done anywhere near as much, but I've done wines, and that's probably about my limit. You've done a lot of beautiful alcohol work, Mark, and
mm,
you've never obviously, it's not an ethical question for you there.
no. Well, the other thing is I drink. If I was a non-drinker, a complete non-drinker, I drink rarely, if I'm honest. But I don't see it. I don't have an issue with people consuming alcohol. Therefore, I don't have necessarily a problem with designing for alcoholic brands. I think in the world that we're in today, again, there are with the expansion of the no-low category. And I know we've touched on it many times before, which is it's something that's still growing now, and I find it quite difficult to try and call it no-no nowadays because soft drinks now start to fit into that category, which gets a bit weird. But if we pose it as what it was a few years ago, which is no-low products are basically alcohol tasting products without the alcohol. So beer without the alcohol, wine alcohol free. Um, I would and still am I enjoy working on all alcoholic brands because I just partly because I understand the categories, the ones with alcohol, no non-alcohol I'm not so understanding of, but they borrow cues. The no-low brands borrow cues from the alcoholic brands. So they're all very much related. And I think nowadays, even with alcoholic brands, you'll find that it's not pushing the drinking and the sessioning and the sort of it's all about just enjoying the liquid, enjoying the social thing around drinking. So yeah, I've never had a problem with working alcohol. And I think that as we're moving forward in time, people are starting to stand on the moral high horse a bit and say, well, no, we won't touch alcohol, which is probably better for the people like me as well. I'll take it. I'd love these work on these things, you know?
No, and yeah, and the same, and I have more challenges, and it links to the processed food stuff as well a little bit, is that I would rather have a clean cocktail or a clean drink with alcohol in it than something that has like 50 grams of sugar in it.
Yeah.
And as because a lot of the non-alcoholic, whatever it is that you have, still have a lot of sugar in.
Yeah.
And so, like, my carbohydrate avoiding head goes, no, I'd rather just have a shot of vodka or whatever it is than all of the things. So you're not really doing anything better by going, oh, I plug these alcohol-free cocktails, but there's still more sugar in it that will, then you're leading a source of diabetic challenges. So it's the same with the vegan food, I think, when everyone's like vegan's more healthy. It can be, I'm sure, but if you're buying processed food with lots of additives and things, it's not necessarily better for your insides. So I think, in terms of alcohol, I think it fits in the same bracket as processed food in my
Yeah,
head.
it does.
Probably even processed food was I remember when we had Thomas Colster on a few years ago, and he was talking about sustainability, but one of his keynote talks is always he worked in advertising and he realized he didn't want to sell cheeseburgers to fat people anymore. And he uses Patagonia as an example, but I think that's an interesting one to plug fast food. And we've worked in a lot of food and beverages across our careers so far, and in terms of those health call outs, like sometimes,
Mm,
and I work on a lot of food, and sometimes all of these like, oh, high in vitamins, high in whatever.
yeah.
And I still think to the health star rating in Australia for Nutrigrain having 5 health stars, which is the highest rating, but still being full of sugar.
Yeah, no, I agree. I get it. And then this is the problem with some of these call outs that we put on pack. Good source, higher source of protein, for example. And it's not really. You look at the percentage of protein in this versus the actual volume of food, you're getting virtually no protein. That wouldn't sustain a mouse, let alone a human being. The one thing that I do challenge myself with is if you've got alcoholic drinks on one side and then gambling products on another, both can be highly addictive. They're both can be detrimental to people's health in turn. So you could argue they're both quite similar. Yet I would probably find it more morally challenging to work on a gambling brand or product than I would do
Yeah,
drinks.
yeah,
That I can't explain right now, and it's not clear in my head of why that is the case. I don't know many alcoholics. I know a few, but I don't know many. But I know that it's dreadful for their health and it's dreadful for their mental health. Gambling, I'm guessing I probably know a few sort of addicted gamblers who are addicted to gambling, but I don't know why. I find it more comfortable working alcohol than with gambling. Are you the same, Liz? I know
I
Australia's quite
tend
different
to.
on their gambling.
No, I tend to agree with you, and I wouldn't not work on gambling. I've worked on pitches for gambling in the past few years since I've been here. But I do understand the tensions in your head. I mean, as
Yeah.
creatives, like I said, I wouldn't turn it down.
There's a lot
But
of
I think
tensions in my head, Liz.
I think it's because you're offering like you could win big. This could change your life, but it could also
Yeah,
destroy your life. And those two extremes, alcohol just feels like a much lower level to
yeah,
me. To you could put all of your pay packet into this to win $1 million, pounds, whatever. There's a chance to win big. I think it's the
yeah.
extremities of win big and someone needing that chance and wanting the opportunity and just desperately wanting to change their life. It sucks you in.
That's a good point. It's and also selling the idea that you're going to win this dream, yet fundamentally the gambling industry or the producer, whoever owns that company is going to make more money than the person they're giving the money to. I guess it's the same with drinks, but yeah, I still stand by that. It's funny. I didn't really pick it up before when you asked if I were to be asked to work on a gambling brand. I don't know, I'd say no, but I would have a good think about it and try and get a bit greater understanding of what it is they're wanting to work, how I'm working. But again, branding and packaging, that's not something that sits in a sort of a packaging environment, but marketing, branding, yes, but not packaging. So I'm less likely to be approached by sort of a betting company.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I watch a lot of football, soccer, depending on where in the
Yeah,
world you are, and which is a lot of that is backed by betting companies. And I sit there and I watched it on the weekend, and Betway, which is actually one that I've pitched
yeah,
for in the past. I'm like, their marketing's great. Like, look our bet, whatever way, like beautiful graphics, nice digital campaign. And this is smart, but obviously I'm not gonna gamble. I'm
Mm,
looking at it from a design and a marketing perspective, and
yeah.
it's simple and it's clean. But the messaging that's happening is so simple. I can see how it suckers people in on a really low level. I know even when we do a syndicate for the lottery at work. I know I'm not really, my future is not in lottery winning. But whenever it's like, it's a rollover quadruple millionaire and no one's won it this week, and someone sends an email out going, remember, you'll be the one who misses out if you don't do it and we win. And I'm like, put my $5 on. And
Yeah.
I don't ever play the lottery otherwise. But when someone's like, oh, it's a rollover, rollover, rollover,
Yeah.
everyone in the office is doing it. And you'll be the only one who has to come into work on Friday if we win. If we win and you
Yeah.
don't. And it suckers me in. So imagine that on a big level where that's like a gambling mentality. So the messaging is like, you'll miss out. And that's
Yeah.
what gambling is kind of, but that can roll into anything, I think. We were talking before about how companies suck you in by getting you to click a button to sign up for something or
Yes.
to give more information. And that almost, the amount of pop-up messages you get now, like click this and don't miss out. Sign up now, subscribe to find out more, and you end up
Mm.
subscribing to things. That kind of sits to me in a bit of that, like, do it now or you'll miss out, which is an ethical challenge of forcing someone into a decision. How do you
I
feel
think,
about
yes.
that?
Just picking up what you're right, we did discuss this just before we clicked record. And that was about categories that are perhaps ethically challenged. And this is something that we as designers now are facing on a regular basis. You definitely at the moment is the use of AI. And how much do we hold our hand up to say we're using AI? Because if we're all entirely honest, I mean, the term AI is quite a generic term, but we all are using it, even just creating, obviously said before about taglines, brand names, just to give us some assistance in sort of and guidance and when we can build on it. But it's to how truthful and, dare I say, authentic we are in telling our customers, clients, and consumers, this is AI produced. And I think more so now than ever, it's becoming quite obvious when you start to see stuff. Is that looks very
Yeah,
AI-y to me, and it's
yeah.
almost
Or
obvious.
even people's posts on LinkedIn or things like that,
Yes,
you can tell. You can tell. And the amount of people I know who work with people who've used AI, they're like, you can just tell the amount of emojis in it, the way
automatically
it's written.
generated, no real thought, no real connection there. It's just it's
No.
very generic, and it's
Yeah.
getting. It feels quite uncomfortable to look at it, and you kind of think, I hope they haven't paid too much money for that because it doesn't feel quite
Well,
right.
yes, from a brand point of view, it's like, oh, it's another AI journaled thing.
Yeah,
And the best use, I will just add, this is totally off topic, but the best use of AI I saw this week is two cats creating a podcast that talks about how dogs are the lower level animal. It's the best use of AI I've seen in ages. Someone I know
brilliant.
sent it to me, and I'm like, we don't need to do a podcast anymore because
Yeah,
there are
the
AI
cat's doing
cats
it.
doing one. They're way funnier than we are. But I think the AI thing is interesting, but you can also train certain models to sound more like you. So I think
Mm,
there's a real skill and a real art moving forward of having a second voice through AI, but it's taking the time to train it because yes, a generic churn it out, it won't sound anywhere near authentic or on brand. So you kind of have to train your AI to sound more like you. And some
yeah,
that I've been playing with do it better than others.
yeah. When you're going into meetings with clients, do you how do I put this? Do you hold down and say we've used our AI tools, be it our own bespoke tools or generic tools, to help us produce this? I know we've spoken about in the past, boards and things like when you're at the initial stages of concepts, when you start pulling together ideas, you can get AI produced concepts which aren't out and aren't like anything else out there. They're just like a sort of
Yeah.
joining of all these different thoughts. And we saw it in the past. I've seen weird concepts produced. But I guess as you move down the process in the creative process, you start to make sure it's now got that human touch to it. Something you go in and you tell them this is we've used our AI tools to
I mean,
produce.
we openly talk with our clients if they say, are you using these kind of tools? And we're using Firefly and Adobe.
Yeah,
We're using Shutterstock AI. We're using video voiceovers, and often we'll be
yeah,
super transparent in terms of voiceovers. We've done a few. They said there just isn't the talent available, but we can use our AI voiceover platforms to do it, and the clients almost choose it to be that way. But in terms of just concepts, like we'll often produce images in AI. If someone asks, of course, we'll tell them. We don't openly go, we do tweak what we do. So even if we've got campaign ideas or territory ideas, for example, for a new brand of whatever, we might generate some of those ideas, but we'll refine them, tweak them, give them visual references. So it's almost merging all those different skills together. Will we have done some of the concept images in AI? Possibly, but
Yeah,
it's a accumulation of different things because there are different
definitely.
AI tools for different things. So it's still our own work because we've curated it together. It's not, we
Mm.
don't literally just take what AI spits out. But in terms of generating ideas, absolutely would admit that we're using some AI tools.
I think
Photography wise and stuff,
anyone
we
says
always
they're not,
shoot.
is
So,
probably lying, or they don't know they're
well,
using it.
well, to be honest, most people who say they're not, like, as a our clients are asking us, like, "You should be using AI tools."
Yes.
So we're working with our clients to test their tools. So
Yeah.
it's almost like they want some of this stuff to be automated.
Mm.
So for us to be on the journey with them is helpful for us. So I
And I
think
think we
you've got to
again, we've spoken on this before, they're getting all these tools are getting better every day, and they're making our learning our own processes to the point where it's becoming slicker and slicker. And long may it continue. I think that sort of as long as our process is getting easier and it gets therefore we're using less time and cheaper for our client at the end of the day to have our produce the work, and it's more revolving.
even outside of the production of work, just simple streamlining of workflows and people knowing what work they're on. We're trialing stuff in terms of writing a more succinct brief. And let's be honest, like it can probably do a better job than a few of the clients we've come across in some of
Yeah,
the
yeah,
years where they give you a brief and it's a one-line brief.
yeah,
Well, we're creating like briefing templates that forced people to fill in all of the bits, not just this is what you need to do. So I think some of those sorts, and then scheduling and things like that, ticking almost like a tick list sometimes of what
yeah.
jobs you need to do for the day for an AI to generate that for you. It's time saving, but it's also less stress for your brain.
No, that's a big. It's a big one for me. I think is the use of AI. A couple of years ago, it was thoughts where you either don't admit to it or it's so bad it's not really usable. Now it's all becoming very much more focused around the work environments, our
Yeah,
own
but
processes, and they sort of created
yeah,
out.
and you can tell. I can tell. I think you can tell certain things have been generated in AI. So I think most people in the world will recognize the posts that are on LinkedIn or even some of the visuals that are produced. There's so many marketing visuals that you go, like, it's all AI, and it feels generic. So it's just elevate yourself and craft beyond just the generic. It's interesting. It's an interesting space at the moment, as we covered in
Right.
a AI little podcast.
Is it ethical? Is branding becoming unethical? What are your thoughts, Lise, in summary?
Is this where we say, like, if you are in pharmaceuticals, please don't contact me. If you work in alcohol or non-processed foods, get in touch.
Yeah.
I I think to your point earlier, and it was a really human moment when you were like, I don't know why I feel tensions around working on gambling, but not
Mm,
alcohol. I do think follow your gut instinct.
yeah.
Like if something doesn't feel quite right to work on, I'm a bit like you, I'm not judgmental. I'm pretty open to working on anything. And
Yeah.
sometimes the things that you know nothing about, I would love to work on a cannabis brand. I would love to, or one of my other ones was lab grown meat. I would love to work on something to do with lab
Yeah.
grown meat because I still think I don't know enough about it, but I think the way it's grown would probably be better for you than some of the mashed up fake plant meats that we're creating today. And so I think wait until you find a bit more out about it. And then if there's still tension, can you tell a story that gives people the choice whether to buy it?
Yeah.
I think sometimes the things you don't know anything about and we go, oh, I wouldn't work on that, probably turn out to be some of the most interesting projects you've ever worked on.
I think the other part to it is I think inherently as designers, we like to improve upon things. We like to make things visually look better. And regardless of what it is, you think I can make that look better. If I can get into the typography, I could craft it. And it doesn't matter whether it's a cannabis brand, whatever it might be, just regardless of your standing, you think, I can make it better. I can give it a go. I can make it look cleaner. I can give it a better color palette, whatever it might be. So yeah, I think you're right. Instinctively, you had to follow your gut. And I think one of your taglines, and it was the gut check. If it doesn't feel right initially, it probably isn't. But you have to use your own mind and thoughts and thinking, where does it fit in your moral compass? If you're completely anti-smoking, it's obviously not going to be working on cigarette brands. But there are other people out there. And I think one thing I wrote on here is within our industry, regardless of your stance or standing on wherever these brands fit and sit, we are guns for hire. We are essentially take us on, we'll do a good job for you, kind of thing. That we will say that. And if we refuse a job, don't want to do it, there'll be someone out there who will. It's like the
Yeah.
cowboys. Anyone
Yeah.
will take. I'm not saying we are cowboys. I'm saying that in that world there are guns for hire, and we are guns for hire.
Yeah.
Yeah, follow your guts. I'm aligned with you on that one, Liz. Very much so.
I think that's a great summary.
Cool. All right, Liz. Well, thank you very much. This has been brilliant.
Thanks,
Ethics.
Mark.
No worries. Listen,
Chat
we'll
soon.
until next time. We'll catch up soon.
Sounds good.